Good afternoon. My name is Laura Stetson. I am a principal with MIG. We are an urban planning firm, and I have the great pleasure this afternoon of talking with my longtime friend John Bridges about his accomplishments in the planning profession, what he's contributed, and what he can share with others who are going to come in our fine footsteps. So John, I really appreciate you being available to spend time this afternoon for a casual conversation about your career and advice that you can offer to people who are really looking forward to as stellar a planning career as you've had.
Well, thank you, Laura. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank Cal Chapter APA and the Planner Emeritus Network for inviting me here today too. So I'm glad to join you.
All right. Well, I've got a lot of questions that I wanted to ask you.
I was afraid of that.
No, I knew. As always, you'll be well prepared, I know. So I hope I'm not going to give you any questions that are going to throw you for a loop. But there are no wrong answers because it's all about you, and we don't have any fact checkers in the room with us today. But
good.
John, you and I have known each other going back, believe it or not, about 30 years. We used to work together at what was once Cotton Boland Associates, a very great little planning firm in Pasadena, which became Cotton Bridges Associates due to your hard work and your leadership in the San Diego office. And you had a long career as a planner, and we're going to talk about that, but you didn't start out as a planner. So before we get to this question, I'd like to say, give you the opportunity to say how you got started as a planner and maybe what you did before that led you to the planning profession.
Yeah, well, thank you, Laura. The way I actually got started in planning is a little circuitous. When I was an undergraduate in college in Texas, I became interested in urban studies and planning, but this was in 1972, and the Vietnam War was ongoing. And so when I graduated, even though I'd had a student deferment for the 4 years I was an undergraduate, I received a letter in the mail shortly before my graduation that invited me to a physical examination at the draft board on the day after my last college exam. It was that close. And so I took the exam, passed it, and became reclassified almost immediately as what they referred to 1A, I think was the classification, which meant you were eligible for military service immediately. And so I was about to get drafted into the armed forces, and I took the tests for flight training in both the Air Force and the Navy. The Navy came back first with an opening, and so I reported in 1972 to Pensacola, Florida for training as a naval aviator and officer. And even though I was interested in going into urban planning, it would be 5 years before I would ever get the opportunity to return and go to graduate school and pursue that career. So when I went into the Navy, I went through flight training. I ended up being assigned to a squadron where I was flying from aircraft carriers in different parts of the world. And I had the opportunity to visit a lot of cities in Asia, in Australia, in Europe, and that sort of rekindled that interest I had in urban planning at the time. But I was still going to need to wait a while before I could pursue that. But by 1977, 5 years later, I had the opportunity to transfer from being on active duty in the Navy to the Naval Reserve. And I would be assigned to a squadron that was here at what was then Naval Air Station Miramar. And so I took advantage of that. That in turn allowed me to start my graduate education in 1977 at San Diego State University. So that's how I kind of got eventually to planning after about a 5-year delay.
Well,
and I will say the one thing that kind of got me interested in planning when I was visiting these cities around the world is I began to see planning as a way to really improve conditions under which people were living in cities, and that interested me a lot.
That's probably not a path that most people take to get into planning.
No, it's not.
And what's scarier, getting in front of a city council or landing on an aircraft carrier? Did that well prepare you for the public
landing
life?
on an aircraft carrier at night's a lot scarier than standing in front of a city council, although both can be, scary at times.
Yeah. Let's walk through, just as an overview, you've given us the beginning of how you got into planning, and
sure.
What was your first job in the profession after you had spent 5 years in the Navy? Was it a tough transition to graduate school and then into planning?
Yeah, okay. No, it wasn't really a tough transition. As a matter of fact, it was really enjoyable because by transferring to the Naval Reserve, I was actually able to continue to fly with the Naval Reserve Squadron for the entire time I was in graduate school, and then for another 9 years after I became a practicing urban planner. So, I was quite busy, obviously, with both, but I really enjoyed the opportunity to do, sort of have these two overlapping careers and do both. So I thought actually that when I went back to planning school, it was really a nice break from the, what I had been doing. It allowed me to sort of make my way back into civilian life. And it was a great opportunity to learn a new profession and look forward to beginning that profession. So I really enjoyed the transition that I was able to make.
And when you finished with graduate school, did you go into a planning job
I
right
did.
away?
I went right into the public sector at the time. I worked for 2 cities in San Diego County. First, the city of San Marcos for a couple of years, and then for the newly incorporated city of Poway for 6 years after that. So I spent 8 years in the public sector at the beginning of my career before I became a planning consultant.
And I clearly remember when you joined CBA, we in the Pasadena office, which is where I was working, thought,
Right.
wow, there's this plan to open a consultancy in San Diego. That's kind of strange. We don't have a presence there. We don't even have any staff there. How did it come to be that you moved from Poway into private consulting? And what was that as deliberate, or were you just wowed by Don Cotton when he said, "Hey, John, come work for us and open this office, and you don't have any staff. Good luck."
Yeah, right, exactly. No, at the time I was actually, I felt like I needed to move from Poway to a new job, and I looked at a couple of other opportunities. This one's kind of interesting because I actually interviewed to become the community development director of the city of Encinitas. But I was offered the job, but I looked at the situation. I thought that's not quite the right fit for me, and so I turned it down. And then Don Cotton approached me and said, look, we're interested in opening an office in San Diego to expand our geography, to provide more services to South Orange County, San Diego, Southwest Riverside, Imperial counties. Would you be interested in joining us? And here I was, a public sector planner with 8 years of experience and no experience at all being a private consultant. So, I immediately jumped at the chance and said, of course I would. And that's sort of how, things are. And Don said, great, we just landed this big general plan job in Encinitas.
So you got to see it from the other side.
I said, Don, let me explain something to you here. I just turned down the job, so the city manager might not be real excited about seeing me again. But Warren Schaefer was the city manager at the time, and actually, so I called him, and I said, Warren, here's what's happened. And he thought for a moment. He was a thinker, and he said, John, if I can't have you as my CD director, I'm really happy to have you as my general plan consultant. So that started things out, in a really good way for me.
And you had a pretty good trajectory after that. You stayed in consulting for many, many years, for the rest of your
28 years.
28
yes.
years in consulting, and
Right.
Very successful running the CBA office down in Encinitas, and a lot of work generated for the San Diego region. And you stayed down here. You worked for AECOM for a bit. Tell us how that came to be, and how that was different to move from a small consulting firm, smaller firm, to a multinational company.
Okay, sure. Well, when I went to work for CBA in 1987, there were several partners within the company, but I was an employee for the first 3 years. And then in 1990, Don offered me the opportunity to become one of the owners, and so I did. And I think about 1997 to 98, the other 2 partners in the firm, Dale Beland and Pat Mann, decided to leave the firm. and that left just Don and me as the owners. And at that point, we renamed the firm to Cotton Bridges Associates.
Very, very fortunate.
Still CBA,
yeah,
yes.
Still
CBA, so that worked out well. And then, we continued to work together. I mean, I was at CBA as either an employee or an owner ultimately for 15 years, but probably in late 2000 or early 2001, Don and I started having discussions about how to make a transition that would allow him to leave the firm, me to stay, and for us to keep all of the employees that we currently had, so maintain all those jobs. And the best option that came up was really the sale of, and by the way, at that point there were actually 3 offices now, Pasadena, San Diego, and Sacramento. Mm-hmm. So at that point, the best option that we came up with was to sell the firm, sell CBA, to a firm called AECOM. And this was in, as I said, about 2001. At that point, I think very few people in the planning profession would have recognized the name AECOM. I know I certainly didn't when I first heard it, but that's because AECOM was kind of an umbrella organization. They had grown through a series of mergers and acquisitions throughout the 1990s. This is going to test my memory. They began with like 5 firms, 5 individual firms that were Consort Townsend, DMJM, Frederick R. Harris, Holmes & Narver, and P&D Technologies. The one thing that AECOM did, and this is why their name wasn't well known, is they allowed the individual companies to keep their brand names. So these were all AECOM companies, but all 5 names were the founding firms. After that, it was just a series of mergers and acquisitions that occurred that added to that list of names. And of course, that can get kind of confusing after a while, but shortly after CBA joined AECOM in 2002, they took a different direction because of that confusion in the marketplace by kind of getting rid of all of those old firm names and going to just AECOM. So today, everybody kind of recognizes AECOM technology in the planning profession as well as other professions.
I think the lesson there for younger planners is the importance of branding.
Yes.
Name recognition.
Exactly, yeah.
Don't confuse the public.
Yeah, don't confuse the public. You don't want to lose those brand names in a way. You can always refer to them, and as you know, within AECOM, we did. We always refer, he's from, and we always talked about the company they came from. But to our clients, having that single brand name was really important to avoid confusion. So.
Well, John, through all those years of working, you've worked with a lot of people. Who would you say were the people who are most inspirational for you and really served as mentors through your career?
Yeah.
And why?
Yeah, okay, sure. I think there were 2 really that I think of when you ask that kind of question. First and foremost is Don Cotton. You know, Don, he brought me into Cotton Bland Associates, as I said, young planner, 8 years of experience. I was 37 years of age, but still young. And didn't have any planning consulting experience, but he, said, come join us. We've heard good reports about you. So Don was 17 years older than me, so the relationship there was kind of like I was, one of his sons. He had 2 other sons, but neither one of them wanted to go into the planning profession, so I was kind of his 3rd son that did want to go into the planning profession. And he treated me like family from the beginning, as he did, as you know, with all of his employees. He certainly, gave me a lot of respect, a lot of room to operate freely. He expected a lot from me in return, but he didn't really just supervise me so closely that I felt cramped in what I was doing. So I really appreciated that. And he taught me all the technical skills necessary to be a good planning and environmental consultant. He taught me how to treat employees with a lot of care and respect and to get the best performance out of them. he was just the kind of guy that was a pleasure to work for. And last thing I'll mention is he taught me how to operate a consulting firm successfully in both good and bad economic times. And so when a really good mentor like Don is somebody who gives you a lot more than you can ever return, and that's Don Cotton. He did that for me. Yeah. And then the other one I would mention is John Kinley from P&D Technologies. John was the leader of that founding company within AECOM, and he's the guy that kind of brought us on board, brought CBA into AECOM. He was very good at helping me understand all the steps that were going to be involved and answering my questions about the transition that would occur from being in this small to medium-sized planning firm and moving to a much larger private firm at the time, about 18,000 employees, mostly land development and engineering firms. And again, he gave me a lot of responsibility, as much as I could shoulder, but he also respected my judgment and my knowledge. And so again, he was very much open to sort of a hands-off approach. Let's see what this guy can do. And I appreciated that. I appreciated his candor. John Kinley was the kind of guy that if you were headed in a direction that he thought was wrong, he's going to tell you about it immediately and explain why. And so I always appreciated his candor. He really helped me in that transition to a larger private consulting firm, and then ultimately when AECOM went public in 2007, the transition that we made to become a large Fortune 500 public corporation. So those are the two that come to mind for me.
I remember John Kinley well. He was a guy, such a straight shooter.
Yeah, he was. He was.
Throughout all of those years with those mentors and the years in public and private planning, what do you think were your most memorable projects? What do you think made the most impression on a community and long-lasting results?
Yeah, so I was looking back, I think I worked for probably as many as 70 different public agencies throughout California, up
Can
and
you
down
tell me
the
the
state.
budgets of each of them?
Can I tell you the names of all of them? Yes, here. No, but I did kind of add that up at one point, and so a lot of different public agencies. So we had public agency clients, we had some private sector development clients as well, but mostly public agencies. And the projects that I remember that were most memorable to me with public agencies were comprehensive general plan programs. Now, I went back and looked at this too. I was involved in over 30 comprehensive general plan programs as a consultant. Those were, again, for a variety of communities, mostly in Southern California, San Diego, Orange County, LA County, Riverside County, Imperial County, but also San Mateo County, Santa Clara County, and Monterey County in Central and Northern California. So a lot of different locations where you're working with a community. Usually probably the average amount of time for a comprehensive general plan program is 1.5 to 2 years, some a little less, some more, some a lot more. But they're complex programs. They involve putting together teams of consultants. Sure, you're the lead, but you've got to have specialists for things like mobility, for fiscal analysis, certainly for a number of the subjects required in a program environmental impact report that needed to be done. So there were these teams that were interesting to form and to work with during the course of these general plan programs. And one of the best things about those longer term programs, you really get involved there with the community. You get to know the elected and appointed officials quite well, as well as the city staff. So you form a working relationship over a fairly long period of time that is quite memorable. And I was also looking at the numbers thinking, gosh, that's, I was doing 1 to 2 general plans for every year I was a planning consultant for 28 years. So I had a lot of them too. Now the most memorable ones of those, I'll narrow it down a little bit, because the most memorable ones for me were actually the 7 general plans that I worked on for newly incorporated cities. The first of those was Poway, when I was still a public sector planner here in San Diego County, Encinitas, and then after that, the remainder were in Orange County. It was Mission Viejo, Dana Point, Lake Forest, Rancho Santa Margarita, and did I say Aliso Viejo?
You just did.
Okay, very good. So those are interesting to me, or were interesting to me, because you're working, there's something about a new city. There's a lot of excitement and vibrancy among the people involved. The elected and appointed officials are there in that role for the first time, probably in their lives. The staff is coming together and working together as a team there for the first time. Now they may have had experience working elsewhere, but they're coming together in that community for the first time. And you just get a whole different vibe from that kind of community, because they don't have any established procedures. Everything is new. They're working every day with something that they haven't dealt with before, that they need to come up with a way to handle. And so it's a very creative atmosphere that arises, because there are no procedures to follow. You just have to come up with them, and everybody's very open to listening to everybody's point of view about what should we do in this case. That translated well to our firm as the consultant on the general plan too. I think in particular decision makers were very open to hearing and listening to our advice on some of the issues that they were going to face in the general plan program and the policy that they set within that plan.
Well, I would think that there would be a lot of excitement around that too, because it's new for them.
It is.
We
Absolutely.
broke away from the county, and we're going to set our own course, and be able to work with somebody to set that course.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times the elected officials that you see in newly incorporated cities are actually the activists that got incorporation through, and so they're very interested in what's going on. They're very hands-on, but they've never been a city council person before, and so they're new to the job. Very interesting environment to work in. I always enjoyed new cities.
Yeah, and you're probably helping them set bounds too, because they don't know what they don't know.
That's
or
right.
They can't do.
Yeah. Sometimes I heard some pretty interesting ideas for how we should do something. Yes. Anyway, lots of fun on those projects. Those are the very memorable ones for me.
In this profession, what do you think we've done really well in California as planners? And on the flip side, what's maybe resulted in unintended consequences? So in the years that you've planned, what do you think we're getting right, and where do you think we need to course correct?
Yeah, this may be even broader than California, but I actually can think of something that I think we did pretty well. Planners did pretty well, but in doing so, it had unintended consequences that we had to go back and revisit and rework a bit. And that is just the whole concept of separating land uses into these categories, these individual categories of residential, commercial, industrial, and so forth. I mean, originally that concept was intended to address problems that existed when we had this mixture of uses going on in cities that created, safety concerns, nuisances, and so forth. And that separation through planning policy and zoning actually did lead to healthier conditions in cities. But it also had some other effects that, were problems. And those problems were things like sprawl and the associated environmental impacts that go with sprawl. So, and the one thing that, sort of culturally was affected was there were, in fact, places in most cities that were kind of special places that did have mixes of uses. Somehow they were compatible with each other in those cases, and they were exactly the places that people loved to be and wanted to spend time in. And by separating uses, all of a sudden we took away the ability to create those places. In some cases, we destroyed existing places like that. And so we've had to come back and sort of revisit that. And that's been happening for a while now, but we had to come up with ways of thinking about how can we combine these uses in a way that is compatible? How can we create mixed use, adaptive reuse, infill development that's going to create these special places and have those exist in our cities while we still have, some of the good side of separating land uses where there are legitimate safety and health and safety concerns.
Yeah, I think it's been very encouraging to see people come around. Oh yeah, mixed use actually works. It worked in cities in Europe for hundreds of years.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What's old is new again, right?
Yes, it is.
You mentioned that you've worked for about 70 agencies in California throughout your career. Northern Southern California, the state of Jefferson to the north. I guess that's actually north of San Francisco if they want to break away. But what are the contrasts that you've seen in working both in the geographies, the perspectives that people have when you're working in Northern versus Southern California, or is it not so different?
Well, no, there are differences. I mean, California's got a wide variety of communities, and it's really kind of a special place to be able to work in California because you get exposed to a lot of these if you're doing work around the state. And so there are differences in communities. And just to give you an example, with a rural inland community, you might be facing an issue that's very specific to that community, like agricultural operations adjacent to residential land, and you may need to deal with that issue in whatever plan, policy, or program you're undertaking. On the other hand, if you've got a coastal community, coastal erosion is going to be an issue that you need to deal with there. The coast is being eaten away by storms or wave action. Very important issue for those folks. Not going to have those, issues in the other community that I just talked about that's rural and inland. So you have differences like that, but you also see, I think, in a lot of places, Northern and Southern California, some common conditions that might exist in what are otherwise very, different communities from one another. And they might be things like underutilization of commercial property in a downtown area, shortage of affordable housing. There are a whole list of those kinds of issues that, you can think of as sort of broader, land use, housing, mobility, urban design issues that you're going to be dealing with in those communities as a planner. And you have to kind of look and see, okay, if we've got these very specific sorts of issues in one community that I need to deal with that don't exist in many communities, how am I going to deal with that? And you have to look really at sort of a more tailored approach, something that may even be one of a kind approach to deal with those issues in certain communities, while at the same time you're going to have other issues in that community that would benefit from the fact that they're kind of common to a lot of places, and you can use state-of-the-art approaches that have been used successfully elsewhere in that same community that has the unusual condition that you need to tailor a program for. And I think that's the kind of approach that planners, need to take when they go into a community, wherever it is, Northern or Southern California, inland, coastal, whatever. You've got to identify those two types of issues, and you've got to figure out how to deal with both types. What's the best way to deal with both?
And it's kind of nice to have a long career behind you for the lessons learned that you can apply to the next community you're going into. But you're right, absolutely right. You go in with a fresh look, though, to say, what I used to describe, or still when I'm doing general plans, is I like to say that a general plan, what you're trying to do is reveal the soul of a community when you're working with it.
I fully agree.
And do you find that part of the excitement is to really find out what makes these people tick, what makes this town tick?
Well, absolutely, and it's interesting sometimes because during general plan programs, of course, you're talking to a lot of people, and you're talking to the leaders in the community, you're talking to city staff, you're talking to local interest groups within that community. And sometimes you hear, sort of conflicting information, so you have to have a way of kind of sorting all that out and finding some common ground. But that's part of the art and science of community planning, and that's what you're there for. And it's fun to actually be a kind of an outsider coming in to do that, as opposed to somebody living in the community who might not be considered to be a neutral third party.
Yeah, exactly right. Let's talk about the planners who are in school today or just fresh out of school, the young planners. What 2 key pieces of advice would you give them as they're looking to launch their careers and to have a successful impact on the communities that they work in?
Yeah, okay. I'm very interested in artificial intelligence, AI, and particularly its effect on the labor force and specifically on planning professionals. And so there was a study done recently by 3 economists at your alma mater, Stanford, and they were studying this issue of, is AI affecting the job prospects for certain workers? And so they concluded that yes, indeed it is for certain job types, software developers, translators, customer relations people, receptionists, those types of jobs.
Oh, don't tell me they're going to turn it all over to computers.
Yeah, it may happen, yes. What they found, of course, there's a big effect there. And so jobs are, AI is in fact limiting the jobs in those job types. However, they also found that there were examples of older software developers, so these are the same technical skills, who had learned some hard to automate people skills along the way, and that they had learned to communicate and work collaboratively with non-coders to actually develop software and get it on into the marketplace so that their companies could be successful. So these people had kind of insulated themselves a bit from the effects of AI on their profession by making sure that they had the people skills necessary to work within whatever situation they're faced with. And then the second thing that they found was that there were a number of categories of jobs where the individuals in those jobs had actually found ways to make AI their helper rather than replacing them. Yeah. And they as a result, they were, they're more cost effective, they're more efficient, they're of greater value to their employers because they can use AI to improve things. And they found that, in this situation, that's something that actually, in those job areas, those job fields, the jobs were growing. They're not being limited, they're actually growing. So I guess with that in mind, my thought, a couple of recommendations for young planners, planning students, would be make sure you learn as much as you can, number one, about AI and how to apply it in addition to or with the planning skills that you learn as you go through a planning education and training. And make sure you do that. And then number two, while you're doing number one, make sure that you also learn the appropriate kinds of people skills, the hard to automate people skills that you need in any kind of human endeavor like planning to be successful. And add that to the technical skills that you have, and you'll be in good shape.
That's exactly what I'd probably tell somebody too. I always tell them to keep working on your writing and your speaking skills as well. Those are two things that will help you whatever career you're in.
Yes, absolutely.
You were in some leadership positions with APA. Were you not the president at one time of Cal Chapter?
I was.
You were?
I was.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a long, long time ago.
Well, besides that, what else have you been very proud of accomplishing from an APA perspective in your career?
Yeah. Okay. So So I worked in different levels of APA. It's basically at 3 levels. The section level, I was the San Diego section director. Later, at the chapter level, I was Cal Chapter president, and then the national level, and there I was the chair of the Chapter President's Council, and that's a position where you're first serving on that council as a chapter president. So when I was Cal Chapter president, I was there as well by virtue of that title. But then that group, the 40 plus chapter presidents from around the nation, then elect a chair of the Chapter President's Council. So I was fortunate enough to be elected chair. And I think that's, well, let me first say, I think that's, something I would highly recommend for anyone who's in planning, is to participate in APA in that way, because it really just expands your knowledge. It expands the personal and professional relationships that you have, and was a real motivator to me in my professional career. But I think the role that I enjoyed most was that of chair of the Chapter President's Council back late 90s, early 2000s, where I was a strong advocate for mandatory continuing education, or certification maintenance as it's now called. And let me tell you, probably young planners these days, think of that as sort of, well, that's just part of being a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, AICP. But back then, it was not required, and there was a lot of discussion. I can remember sitting around in these Chapter President's Council meetings with all these chapter presidents around a bunch of tables, and you would hear this discussion going on about whether we should have mandatory continuing education or not. And there were impassioned pleas on both sides of that argument from the people sitting around that table. So it wasn't something that we've always had. It's relatively new within the last 25 years or so in one form or another. But today, I think it's done a lot to elevate this, the profession in the eyes of those that look at us, and I'm happy to have played a part in that.
Well, I want to thank you for that, John, because I never knew where that came from. And
well, it wasn't my idea
but
necessarily, but it was, it was an issue that was being discussed at that level. And like I said, it was not a slam dunk by any means.
Well, I would say, as a fellow AICP person, I have really appreciated the fact that we do have to have continuing education, because you have to stay on top of things, and it's so fun to keep learning.
Yes.
If somebody were to ask you, John, should I study for the AICP exam? Is there going to be a benefit to me?
Yeah.
What would you say to a young planner asking that question?
Well, I think everyone who's a planner should be striving to do exactly that, become a member of AICP, and I think that just shows your dedication to the profession. It in turn bestows a title on you that recognizes you as a professional planner, not only in your eyes, but in the eyes of others who are looking at you as you do your work. It's just a way that we have been able to, I think, elevate the profession and make sure that we have professional standards that we uphold.
And you've been recognized as a fellow of AICP for all of your hard work, and that's great.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Well, John, you've retired from planning. I thought this was a career that people just never gave up.
Some people.
What have you been doing in the years since your retirement?
Yeah, so I was in planning for 36 years, and so when I left planning and retired 10 years ago in 2015, I really wanted to kind of step back and do some things that I didn't have time to do when I was busy working as a planner. And so one of those things that I'm doing these days, and have done for actually the last 12 years, is I'm a docent at a tour guide at the USS Midway Museum, the historic aircraft carrier that's in San Diego Bay next to downtown. And so I spend 1 to 2 days a week there doing tours, answering questions, basically describing life and operations and flying aboard an aircraft carrier to people, guests from all over the world. And it's a great opportunity. One of the things I really like about it is some of my fellow docents are actually guys that I went through flight training with over 50 years ago. And we're all there together again. And it's not quite like being, back in the Navy in a squadron where you're flying together, but it's the next closest thing. So we, of course, tell all our stories to each other over and over again. They get better and better each time.
They should.
But it's a lot of fun to be there. And so I'm enjoying doing that. One of the other things that I guess I've always kind of maintained, myself in fairly good physical shape. But when I retired 10 years ago, I had much more time to engage in physical activity. So I, started going to the gym more and that kind of thing. Actually, one of our former AECOM colleagues, Ray Rinko, is my personal trainer. That's what Ray is doing in retirement. He's the personal trainer. I'm one of his trainees, and so I have a lot of fun working out with him as my trainer. But about 3 years ago, he recommended that I enter the California Senior Games, and this is a competition where they have a lot of different sports, team and individual sports. But the category he recommended was what's called the fitness category, where there's like 10 different events, but you just pick the events you want to do. And I'm happy to say that for the last 2 years at least, I brought home 2 gold medals in those events. One in what's called 500-meter rowing, which is a rowing machine, not rowing in the water, rowing machine. The other was what they call kettlebell bench squats, where you're holding a heavy kettlebell and just doing squats till you drop. And so I've been happy to do that. I'm adding one more event this year, and that's bench press, so we'll see how that goes. But I've been doing that side of things. I guess that competitive spirit I've always had is coming through in that. Well, and then a couple other things too that I'll mention. But you had a second question.
I'm going to go off camera for just a sec, because I've heard that oh my goodness, look what I found here.
No, well, I was going to mention that.
I hear that you can play this.
Let's see if it's even in tune. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's not.
Oh, come on. I tuned it before
I tell you, I'm going to hold this. I'm not going to play it for you, but I'm going to hold it here and say, yeah, for like the last 10 years, I've been taking ukulele lessons and playing ukulele. And the guy that brought me to this was actually an old friend and planning colleague, Paul Zucker, may he rest in peace. Yeah. And Paul got me into playing ukulele. Now I'm a member of a ukulele club here in San Diego that we get together once a month at a local bar, and we have a lot of fun there. I mean, the guy that leads it is he's a professional musician, and he has a band. We have a stage there with a sound system and so forth. About 40, 50 people show up, and we have a songbook with like 300 songs, and you can get up and join the band and sing the song. All you have to do is sign up on the sheet to get up there and do it. So we get up there and we do a lot of playing and singing and dancing, maybe a little drinking.
All at the same time.
All at the same time. It's a lot of fun here. So yeah, I do that, but I'm not going to play.
You're not going to play it today.
No,
darn it.
Not today. And then the last thing I want to mention though that I do, which I really enjoy, is we have the luxury of having at the moment 10 fellows of AICP living in San Diego, and about every 3 to 4 months we all get together for a dinner and just have a good time, because we'll discuss, we'll attempt to solve all the major planning issues of the day. We haven't been all that successful at those attempts, but it's really a lot of fun to get together and just spend time with old friends and colleagues. So that's how I'm spending my time these days, Laura.
Well, it really sounds like a lot of fun, John. For all the years that you've put in, you're having this time to relax and do things that you enjoy. I know your wife, Susie, you and she probably have a lot of good travels together, and you live in America's finest city down here in San Diego.
So they say.
So they say, and so we invite everybody. I don't remember when the next conference session is here, but maybe you can drop in and say a few words to inspire the planners.
I look forward to doing that, Laura. Thank you.
Well, thanks for volunteering to do this and spending your time and sharing your story with us. Is there anything else you'd like to make sure the world knows before we conclude?
No, I don't think so, Laura. I think this is plenty.
Okay. Well, thanks, and say goodbye to the planning world.
I will. Take care, folks. Nice to be here today with you.